Welcome to another episode of Moving Markets Podcast. I am Jeffrey Dunyan, the owner and founder of Safe Option Strategies, who brings this podcast to you each and every day. The market is open. Glad to have you here on a Monday afternoon. The U.S. stock market has been closed for just about an hour at the time we're recording today's podcast. We're going to go over what happened today. We're going to talk about what's going on for the rest of this week and even a little bit of a preview of some things that are going to go on for the remainder of this year. There's some crazy election news going on. It's going to be a very interesting, fun election season. It already is. And some of what is potentially happening with candidates and with political parties has a possibility of affecting the markets as we go forward. Some of what's going on is not going to have much of an effect on the markets, and we're going to talk about that a little bit in today's podcast. Make sure you take some time before this podcast is over or at the end of it. Take some time to go to sostrades.com. Take a look at the different packages that we offer. We are up almost 30% now on the trades that we send out to the members of our program, and we're barely 2 months into the calendar year. We are on pace to have a record-breaking, scorching return if we continue on this trajectory. We don't expect there to be no bumps along the road, but we are off to a phenomenal start, and we want you to be able to participate in that. Every single week, we send out new trades to the members of our program. If they just follow those trades that we do, if they choose to do that in their portfolio, they can see the same kind of returns we are. And like I said, 2 months into the year, and we are already up almost 30% on these trades that we send out. You got to take a look at it and check it out, see if this is something you want to be a part of, and ask yourself, can you afford to not be a part of this? Like I said, we're just off to a record-breaking, scorching start, and we expect it to continue through the year. Please enjoy the podcast. Please give us some feedback. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like us if you're watching it on another platform. Make a comment, ask a question. We would love to hear back from you. And with that, please enjoy the rest of the podcast. All right, so I'm going to tell you that today was kind of a ho-hum, blah, blah kind of day. And the reason I'm going to tell you that, even though the Dow Jones Industrial Average finished to the downside about 0.25%, it spent a good portion of the day not very far down. At times it was only 20 or so points down, kind of flat in the big picture. I mean, 25 points or 97 points, 0.25%. That's not a tiny flat movement, but it's not a very big movement. The S&P only down 0.12%, and the NASDAQ down a little less than 0.5%, a little over 0.33%. That's a little more, a little bit bigger move on the NASDAQ, but still, the NASDAQ spent some time today in positive territory. It went negative towards the latter part of the day. If you look at this one-day intraday chart on the NASDAQ, you can see that with only 30 minutes left in trading, it was still in positive territory. Spent a lot of the day really flat, went positive a little ways with about an hour left in trading, and then with a half an hour left, it just sold off and went down to kind of the session lows to close the day at. I'm not overly concerned about that. I'm really not. I don't think that's that big a deal. I would say still overall, it's kind of a flat day. But in spite of the NASDAQ being down overall, you've still got companies like NVIDIA that saw another great day. This juggernaut of a company just keeps going up another 3.5% today, already up a little bit in aftermarket trading. I got to tell you, there are people changing their near-term price target, their 6-month to 1-year price target. They're already listing at $1,000 a share on NVIDIA. And even though it hasn't come directly from NVIDIA, there are a number of analysts that are starting to talk about the possibility, if not the likelihood, that NVIDIA is going to do a stock split. Now, I would love to see if they got up around $900. I personally would love to see a 10-to-1 stock split and have them come down under $100. I would be okay with something like an 8-to-1 stock split, where maybe they come down to $150, $140 a share. Anything under $150 a share, if they do a split and the price of the stock comes down to anything below $150 a share, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm all in on Nvidia, not just with some more option plays, but I'm going to be all in on Nvidia with some stock ownership and a new collar trade. Nvidia is this is a juggernaut. This is the stock of the at least near future, if not longer term future. And I think you'd be crazy not to be invested in some way, shape, or form in Nvidia right now. It's just absolutely fantastic. There was not a huge amount of news that drove the markets today. There was political news. There was the 9-0 decision by the Supreme Court that says, the state of Colorado cannot take Trump off the ballot for the primaries and for the general election. It's up to the voters to decide. I think most people believed that decision was going to come in either 8-1 or 9-0. There are some liberal media outlets trying to almost hyper focus on finding some negative in that decision and saying that, yeah, but the 3 liberal judges left the door open for other things, or made sure they let everyone know that we have to leave him on the ballot, but that doesn't exonerate him of anything. Speaking of Trump, look, I just think it's a win for the country and a win for the democracy of our country. But I don't think it really played into the way the markets move today. And I don't think it will play into the way the markets moved. I think there are some other states, Illinois and Maine, are going to, in the next 12 to 24 hours, they're going to have to announce that they've completely thrown out their case, because this case set a firm precedence on states not being able to remove Trump from the ballot. So those other states that are trying to do that are just SOL, out of luck, and it's simply not going to happen. And I think at the end of the day tomorrow, when Super Tuesday is over, Nikki Haley will have to drop out of the race on the Republican side. She's going to get slaughtered. I don't dislike Nikki Haley, by the way, but she's going to get slaughtered tomorrow. It's already a foregone conclusion that Trump's going to be the nominee, whether you love him or hate him. It's what the Republicans are going to put forward. I think it's more in question whether Joe Biden makes it to the finish line and does not get replaced at the Democratic convention. I think the only reason he's not going to step aside before the convention is because it's actually going to be easier for the Democrat convention to choose the candidate that the establishment wants. Whereas if Joe Biden stepped down right now, it could throw the process into chaos for the Democrats, because I think you'd have too many people on the Democrat side putting their hat in the ring suddenly. You'd have Gavin Newsom, you'd have Gretchen Whitmer, you'd have, I think Robert Kennedy Jr. would go back from saying he's independent to saying he's a Democrat, and who knows who else might jump into the race. The Democrat governor from, I believe it's is it Kansas, that is a very Republican state but has a Democrat governor. I think Joe Manchin might jump in. It would create chaos for the Democrats. And I think that's the reason they're leaving Joe Biden there. They're hopeful that Joe Biden does not diminish so far mentally and physically in the next month or two, which is a real crapshoot. I mean, that's a major if. They're hoping he doesn't, decline so much in the next month or two that they can limp him into the convention and then have him go on stage with Jill, having her hand up the puppet's rear end, moving the mouth and saying, for the sake of the country, and because I'm such a noble person and such a good person, I'm going to step down and here's, I want Gavin Newsom to take my place. And then, all the delegates will fall in line and do that. That's what I think is going to happen. Anyway, I think some of that could play a bigger effect on the markets. That's the reason I'm talking about it, not to be political, but although I'm showing my politics a little bit, but it's more about saying that's what I believe is going to happen. And some of that, if it doesn't play out in a smoother way, could potentially have an effect on the market. If Joe Biden just declines to the point where they have to retire him and put him out to pasture prior to the convention, then I think that could throw the Democrat Party in chaos, and it could have a negative impact on the markets temporarily, because the markets don't like uncertainty. And believe it or not, there is more certainty in having your two candidates, your Democrat and your Republican candidate, early early in the process be defined and set in place. That creates more certainty for the markets than to have total chaos in one party or the other, or both. Now there's still the chance that Trump loses some legal arguments along the way, and that turns some independent voters off, and that could skew things. And so it's going to be a crazy political season, and don't pretend that it couldn't have a big effect on the markets. As far as the rest of this week goes, this is the big monthly jobs report. You're going to get ADP and JOLTS numbers in 2 days, and don't discount factory orders. This could play a role in tomorrow's market movement. But these jobs numbers that come in respectively on Wednesday and then on Friday, they're going to be the next tell that gives us an indication of whether or not the Fed lowers rates, and if so, how soon might they lower rates. I'm finding myself more and more in the camp of and I've believed for a while that inflation is going to rear up again a little bit. We've seen some small indication of that. Right now, you've got the expectation for March is that there are no rate cuts. The market is building in a much greater chance than it was a short time ago that there will be no rate cuts in May. And when we get out to June, it's not an overwhelming majority that we get a rate cut. And the ADP numbers on Wednesday and the overall jobs numbers on Friday could paint a picture that makes people question whether even June would bring about a rate cut. I'm finding myself more and more in the camp of no rate cuts before we get to September, November, and December. And I kind of hope there is not a rate cut in September, because even if that is the most appropriate timing for a rate cut with no political consideration at all, I guarantee it's going to be looked at as a political thing, and it's going to be really difficult to not see it as political if Jerome Powell and the rest of the Fed comes out and makes a rate cut in the month of September. That's too close to the elections for it to not appear political. So if we get a rate cut, I hope we get it in June rather than July or September. But I'm thinking we might not see anything until maybe one rate cut in November. And I'm still not going to be shocked if inflation rears its head again, and if some of these numbers don't go the way of an improving economy that would allow for a rate cut, if there's not a chance the Fed makes a rate increase sometime this year. I don't think that's going to happen, but I wouldn't be shocked by it. So even though the reports are factory orders, ADP job numbers, which is private job numbers, and then the government job report on Friday, it's still all about the Fed and what people start thinking about rate cuts, no rate cuts, whatever the case may be. That's what's going to drive these markets up or down. Are we going to continue the rally that we've seen in the early part of this year? Or are we going to see a pause and a little bit of a rollover? If I had to, I would vote maybe 55-45 that we see a pause and a little bit of a rollover before we see a continuation of the rally that's taken place since the start of the year. So that's what I see happening. I'm going to wrap up right there. Off to a fantastic start for those SOS members. For those of you that might be listening to the podcast that are not yet members, well, you got to check out things at sostrades.com and see if you find something there that is affordable to you and attractive, and ask yourself, can I afford not to get the kind of growth that these guys are getting in exchange for the cost of what the education and the advisory is? So take a peek at that. Everybody have a great rest of your Monday, and we'll be back tomorrow with an update on what happens in Tuesday's market. Thanks. Bye-bye.